Supercars are back after their unofficial mid-season break, and while we're not quite at the Enduros yet, this weekend in Tasmania will be crucial, I feel, for some of the key championship contenders. So let's jump into everything you need to know before the cars hit the track. Our battleground for round 8 of the season is of course the historic Symmons Plains Raceway, a fantastic little track located just outside of Launceston in Tasmania. It's a road course only 2.4 kilometers in length, featuring just 7 turns, but all of them incredibly exciting and unique. The circuit itself runs in an anti-clockwise direction, and I'd say the risk rating around here is more on the medium side. The walls here aren't too dangerous, but more just the layout and the racing action it produces often results in a lot of car-to-car contact. The lap gets underway quickly with a sharp rise and fall through the right-hander of turn 1, and you immediately find yourself in the near enough 90-degree left-hander at turn 2. After that, it's a quick flick through 3. This one has some great camera angles, by the way. There's usually one on the guardrail at the exit and one on the bridge above as well. You find yourself at one of the most iconic corners in Australia, of course, the turn 4 hairpin. Absolutely fantastic watching the cars under brakes into here, and we'll chat more about its quirks very shortly. You're flat out down to turn 5, a pretty much foot to the floor corner. However, if you've got someone next to you, it will get your attention, and that's really important because it sets you up for one of the key overtaking locations at turn 6. After that, you immediately feed yourself through turn 7, which looks basic on paper, but if you get this one wrong, there is a concrete wall waiting for you on the pit straight. In terms of spots to watch, of course, that turn 1 is such a feature of this track. The sudden rise and fall turns what would be a fairly mundane piece of racetrack into a true highlight on the calendar. The cars get very light over here, and if you want to execute an overtake at turn 2, you have to be brave and bold and go around the outside over that rise. It's really exciting to see someone pull off a move there, and that goes for turn 4 as well. We see all sorts of stuff down here, whether it's lap 1 or deep into the race. It's always action packed. On lap 1, we often see a big concertina or accordion effect where the cars bunch up into another, which can often lead to pile-ups on the exit. And later into the race, it's a great spot to watch because it's one of the few places where you can really see different driver techniques. It's almost NASCAR-esque in the sense you've got multiple lines, whether they be low or high. It's just really interesting to see how the drivers tackle this part of the racetrack. My final spot to watch is actually the space between turn 6 and 7, because last year with Gen 3, we saw lots of wheel interlocks that actually sent the car on the outside off into the paddock. Seems to be a bit of a trend last year. I'm curious to see if it continues this time round. If you're anything like me, you are counting down the minutes until we get to see the Gen 3 cars on this strip of tarmac once again, and that will start on Friday at 2:20 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time for the first practice session. We do see more practice though as we head into Saturday. We get one of those odd 20-minute sessions in the morning, followed by qualifying just after midday, and race 1 of the weekend gets underway at 4:10 p.m. local time. That one will be a distance of 55 laps. We pretty much repeat that format with another practice session to start Sunday, qualifying once again around midday, and then that last race of equal distance to finish up the event. The weather forecast being Tasmania at this time of the year is frankly all over the shop, but at the time of recording, rain is set to play a bit of a factor, especially on the Friday and Saturday. Showers more than likely at this stage to impact some of those sessions, and it could make the Saturday race quite interesting, although not so comfortable for the crowd, unfortunately. Sunday's looking a little better at this stage though. We shouldn't see any rain, might be partly clouded, but hopefully plenty of sunshine to make up for what could be a damp start to the weekend. Alright, it's obviously been a little bit of time since the last event at the Sydney Super Night, so let's catch up on some of the bigger headlines that have dropped while supercars are being in the garage. Firstly, the silly season has now pretty much officially kicked off, I would say, with our first big driver announcement being Richie Stanaway, who's actually on his way out of the Grove Racing team at the end of this year, and in his place Kai Allen, one of the Super 2 drivers, will be entering the main game. I've got really mixed feelings about this. I wouldn't say I'm a massive Stanaway fan, but I do feel that he at least deserved a couple of years to try and get his feet back under the table, and I think it's a shame that that comeback is now under a bit of threat after only half a season. Equally, I'm really excited to see Kai Allen. He's really exciting talent into the main game, although I am really curious as to why DJR let such a promising prospect go to a rival. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out in the coming years. The form guide in the second half of this year is going to be fascinating as well, and there could be a little bit of a reset because plenty of teams have been doing some testing during the break over recent weeks, and it'll be interesting to see who might have found something and unlock some more speed. I think Red Bull are perhaps the ones soul searching the most at the moment. They haven't been their usual impeccable selves, and with the championship battle starting to get a little bit hotter, they'll be looking to come out swinging. Of course, we all eagerly await news on the 2025 calendar, and during the break there's been some fresh doubt if we will get the rumored expansion up to 14 rounds. This one is really nerve-wracking. I really hope we don't get a situation like last year where we wait for months on end for the calendar only to discover that there's nothing all that exciting in it in terms of expansion. We will be able to enjoy more Supercars action in the virtual world soon, with it being officially confirmed that the Gen 3 Supercars and 2 Australian circuits, the Bend and the Adelaide Parkland circuit, they'll be on their way to iRacing later this year. And while it's not quite the full Supercars game we're all crying out for, I think it is hopefully a step in the right direction. I'm curious to see if they use this as a platform to build that full-blown game in the coming years. I really hope we do see that. Then finally, in business land, Foxtel, who own the broadcast rights for Supercars here in Australia, are reported to soon be selling a big chunk of the shares of their company. Now, this is of interest for Supercars because they're currently renegotiating the next TV deal, which you would assume would be another tie-in with Fox, and a new owner entering the picture could potentially complicate what you would think are fairly advanced negotiations at this stage of the process. Fingers crossed not, just something to keep an eye on, and fingers crossed we get a good result for the sport. Alright, there's been a bit of news with the Gen 3 machines as well, the first of which was actually a warning from Supercars following the Sydney Super Night. They put out a strongly worded statement to the teams reminding them not to make unauthorized changes to the Gen 3 cars, which are effectively spec machines these days. Now, this followed reports that teams were implementing their own fixes for chassis cracking, which you understand why they'd be wanting to do that, but of course, those kinds of alterations do need to be signed off by the sport. I'm in two minds about this. For one, the teams must be frustrated that they have to fix what is effectively a bit of a defective product that isn't lasting the test of time. But at the same time, I also see Supercars' perspective that if you allow teams to make little adjustments here and there when they shouldn't, all of a sudden you could open a Pandora's box and you've got all sorts of things going on under the hood. One of the last pieces of the parity puzzle has seen a slight delay with the engine dyno testing taking place in America right now. Phase 1 has been complete, where I understand they effectively benchmarked the two engines, the Chev and the Ford, but Phase 2 is meant to be underway by now, but they've had a slight delay to that. It looks like they're analyzing the data they've got so far and coming up with a plan on how they're actually going to equalize those two engines. I'm in two minds about the delay. Part of me is a little bit nervous that things aren't going as originally planned. At the same time, I'm also pleased that they're being flexible and taking their time to hopefully get it right. The equipment outside of the car is under the spotlight as well, with lots of teams reporting different performance when it comes to their standard refueling equipment. Teams reporting in Sydney, and frankly for a lot of rounds since Gen 3 was introduced, that they have different refueling rates. It sounds like the standard of the refueling equipment does vary team to team, and it's obviously meant to be the same. And it's a big part of the sport, especially when you get to the enduros, because the speed at which you can fill the car up obviously has a huge bearing on your race. So fingers crossed they fix those problems, and in addition to equalizing the performance, it sounds like they're going to make them a little bit faster to fill the cars as well. Alright, so what about the storylines this weekend? Because there's a lot to be excited about. My first one is, who's going to come out swinging after this break? It's a crucial weekend, I think, to set the tone for the back half of the championship. I mentioned Red Bull are having something of a slump by their standards. They've got that championship lead in the driver's side, but there's no doubt they've got some people hot on their heels. That, of course, is Chaz Mostert, the first one in line, and he's been closing up recently. They've had some great performances. However, of course, the super soft tyre is in play this weekend, and they've had some rough experiences with that compound, so it's going going to be a really important test for them, and they're going to have a lot of eyes on their garage. The second storyline is, of course, the weather. Eyes will be to the sky as well to see what the rain is going to do. It's very unpredictable. I, for one, as someone watching from the comfort of my couch, hopes we get a mixture of dry and wet conditions. I'd love to see a wet race on Saturday, a dry race on Sunday, just to change up the dynamic a little bit day to day, but I know the fans track side will be hoping for more of the sunny stuff. And my last storyline is the fact this could be the last time we see the SuperSprint format in its current guise. The SuperSprint has seen lots of changes over the years, and this year it's been subject to a lot of criticism that the identical race lengths on Saturday and Sunday lead to essentially boring racing where the teams work out the optimal strategy. Tim Edwards has strongly hinted to the media that they'll be switching that up in 2025, which I'm very much looking forward to. However, fingers crossed we still get some action-packed racing this weekend. All right, let's start finishing up with some predictions. As always, I'm basically throwing stuff out here and seeing what sticks, but I do try to bring some logic to the argument. The first prediction I have is that Matt Stone Racing will get a podium. This is based on the fact they had a pretty strong showing here last time out in 2023, and Nick Perker has had some strong performances throughout this year as well. He's also had some poor ones, but I'm predicting a good performance for them and that they'll get a podium. My second prediction is that Brad Jones Racing will have at least 2 of their cars in the top 10 in one of the races. These guys have had some real struggles so far in 2024, but I'm hoping they've had a reset after the mid-season break. And then my final prediction is just an opportunity to get on a soapbox and talk about turn 5. I'm predicting we might see a crash there in the wets this weekend. It's a part of the track that's made me nervous for a few years. It's a exposed concrete wall, albeit on the other side of a fairly decent gravel trap at a really fast part of the circuit. I'm really surprised that they don't have tires in front of that concrete wall, because it is an extremely fast bit of racetrack, and if there's water down and the grass is wet, I'm really nervous about a car eating that wall one day. As always, I'll pick a few things out from your predictions. First one from John here, making the good point that he's hoping Ryan Wood will find some form again this weekend. Ryan Wood is an interesting one. He's clearly a very exciting talent, and he was building some good momentum in the first half of the season, then just seemed to tail away as we approach that mid-season break. So yeah, fingers crossed he comes back rejuvenated. Second prediction here from Marshall, saying Will Brown to get a win after starting from 6th or below. This would hint at a pretty exciting race, because it feels like Gen 3 is very qualifying dependent, with more often than not the pole sitters of the top cars competing for the victory. We don't see too many comeback drives, and maybe the sprint format is a factor in that. So yes, if we did see someone, Will Brown or someone else, come back from 6 or below, I think that would hopefully mean a exciting race. And then finally, Xavier saying crazy drama on lap 1 with a big pile up at the hairpin could see big contenders knocked out of any of the races. And this is a great prediction to finish up on, because Tassie is just wild, especially by the time you've got some rain in the air as well. And as we saw last year, championship contenders can get involved in accidents, so we could very well look back on this weekend as a crucial chapter in the 2024 championship. And being Tassie, we've got some pretty unique support categories, first of which is the Porsche Sprint Challenge, and then Formula Ford, who we don't see at too many supercars events. It's an important grassroots category. I've got to admit, I do struggle to watch it myself, but I certainly respect its importance. Tassie Tin Tops are there as well. These are always great fun, good variety in the cars that make up those races. And then Aussie racing cars, who always have amazing slipstream battles around the strip. They'll be well worth the watch. That brings my Symmons Plains preview to a close. So if you want more content from me, I released a discussion video just the other day talking about Supercars night racing, how I'd like to see it done in the future, what tracks I'd like to see under lights. So be sure to go and check that one out if you want some more. And in the meantime, treat people like your trackside down there in the comments, and enjoy this weekend of racing, because it's Tassie time.